It's funny after Pitt's last win over Syracuse. I remember taping a Morning Pitt. I forget if I taped it that night or the next morning or the next day. I forgot when it was that I talked about it. Pitt's 73-65 win up at the Dome. And I remember being lukewarm about it. I mean, in that case, Pitt had broken a losing streak. They had a 4-game losing streak. They broke it with that win at Syracuse. Finally got back on the winning track after they opened with the Virginia Tech win, and they beat Cal and Stanford, and then they went on that 4-game losing streak, and they broke the losing streak. So it was good. They were back on the winning track. They did what they needed to do. Blah blah blah. Came back and won in the second half, which is what they do when they win it all. But I remember being sort of lukewarm about it because I didn't come out of that game feeling like the things that had been problems during those 4 games that they lost, that they had really been addressed or improved upon. And so I didn't want to throw a wet blanket on it, but I sort of honestly said, look, I need to see more. Like, I need to see this team actually, do better in a lot of areas. The slow starts, the rebounding, and some of the other issues that they had in that game, which they ultimately overcame and won. And then they won the next game. They beat North Carolina, right, where they fell down by 10 in the first half, and they were able to come back and get a win there. And we know what played out after that. Another 4-game losing streak, and now Pitt is back on a 2-game winning streak after beating Miami on Saturday and beating Syracuse last night at the Peterson Events Center. And so I didn't, I thought a lot about this last night as I was walking out of the Peterson Event Center, about how I felt about that win, about how I felt about, the team, and about, was it comparable to that last Syracuse game where I was sort of, like I say, kind of lukewarm on the results, because I wasn't just thinking about, the value of getting that victory, but about what it means going forward. And there was certainly a lot of pressure on Pitt the last time they played Syracuse, even more so last night, where they really are in a do-or-die situation. I continue to believe that this team has to win out in the regular season to lock itself into an NCAA tournament bid. I continue to believe that this team has to either win out all of its remaining regular season games or win the ACC tournament. It's one or the other. It's hard for me to see a scenario where they lose a game here in the final, what is now final 5 games of the regular season, starting Saturday at Notre Dame, it's hard for me to see a scenario where they lose one of those games and still make it into the NCAA tournament short of winning the ACC tournament. I think that game at Louisville on, when is that? March 1st, so 2 weeks, next Saturday, I guess it is. That game at Louisville could be enough to overcome or offset the loss to Virginia. But you can't lose any of these other games. You can't lose at Notre Dame. You can't lose to Georgia Tech. You can't lose at NC State. You can't lose to Boston College. Even though Notre Dame and Notre Dame and NC State right now on the road would be quad 2 games, you can't lose those games. I think you've given yourself no margin for error by getting no high-quality wins, only one high-quality win, and having that one really bad loss against Virginia. So, we're thinking about everything in terms of that, in that kind of prism, right, of what it'll take to make the NCAA tournament. And so in that respect, a win last night was big because they needed to win and they need to keep winning. But we're also looking at that game and thinking, what does it mean for the next 5? Were there things we saw there that could translate into wins in the next 5? Were there things that we saw in the Miami game that could translate into wins in the next 5? And while I'm still somewhat lukewarm, the slow starts are still an issue. I think rebounding is still an issue, even though Pitt ended up even with Syracuse in rebounds and won the second half on the boards. I think rebounding is still an issue. I think there are reasons why they were able to tie Syracuse in rebounds last night and win the second half, primarily because they shot so well in the second half. There weren't as many defensive rebounds available for Syracuse to corral, and I think that helped Pitt win the boards. But that's another conversation. 3-point shooting continues to be an issue. 3-point shooting defense, I should say, continues to be an issue. And a number of other sort of smaller things, but those are the 3 big ones. These slow starts, and a lot of these are interconnected. These slow starts, the rebounding, and the 3-point shooting defense. And so I came out of last night's game where all 3 of those were on display and not necessarily to Pitt's benefit, and said, a little lukewarm on some of that. But we're also coming out of a win, right? Pitt just won last night, got a win that they needed. improved to 16-10 overall, 7-8 in the ACC. They're keeping those hopes alive. So instead of dwelling on the lukewarm, instead of dwelling on the issues that I still see with this team and the concerns that I have about what they could do or where they could go or how good they could be, let's talk about some of the things we saw last night in particular, a little bit in the Miami game that should, maybe give you hope. All right, because I'll be honest. I should go to the intro before I start into this diatribe. I'll be honest. Okay, Pitt has now played 26 games this season. I'm past the point. I'm almost past the point, and maybe past the point of thinking, okay, here's where they can turn it on. Here's where they can flip a switch. They can get better. They can, all those little things that they should be able to do, all those things they should have been, all those things they should have been able to accomplish as a team. They can do them now. They can be that team as it all comes together and they come roaring down the stretch. I mean, it's not a totally implausible scenario. It's just more and more unlikely with every passing game where it doesn't happen. And even though they looked like that team in the second half last night, the reality is they still had the first half where they fell behind 22-6, where they had to battle back from a double-digit deficit for most of the half and barely got it down to single digits at halftime, which is what I thought they needed to do, in order to have a chance in the second half. You keep waiting for them to turn that corner. And after 26 games, I'm not entirely sure if they will. But if they are going to turn a corner, if they are going to take big steps forward as a team this season, there are a few things that they're going to have to do. And more sort of relevantly and more tangibly, there are a few things that I think they did last night. A few emerging storylines and themes with this team really over the last two games that if they can continue, they just might be able to get hot and go on a run. So let's talk about what really stood out in last night's game, what Pitt can build on from last night's game, what some of those big emerging trends and themes and storylines are that just might carry this team to where they're ultimately trying to get, which is the NCAA Tournament. We'll get into all that and more right here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Of course, you know that already. That's the website below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. You know what we always ask you to do is like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And don't skip ahead from this part because I have an important thing to say, an important announcement here. Typically we do these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday, and then we have our weekly live show every Wednesday night right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have post-game press conferences and interviews and things like that. Well, a little bit of a change this week due to some scheduling conflicts. We are not going to have a live show tonight. So I hope you didn't skip past this part. We will not be live tonight at 8:30. Debated on when to move it to. I've decided we're going to do something a little bit unique. We've done things like this before, but we haven't really done it in a while, and not kind of in this sort of setting. But we're going to go live tomorrow morning, probably like 10:30. We're going to have a live Panther-Lair show, a special live Panther-Lair show tomorrow morning at 10:30 right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We've done a few of these morning live streams in the past. We've done them on signing day or when there's major breaking news or sometimes like the morning after a Thursday night football game or something like that. So we're going to do that tomorrow. We'll have a live show tomorrow, Thursday at 10:30 a.m. I think it'll be a lot of fun. We'll talk about what's going on. We'll talk about Pitt sports. We'll talk about Pitt basketball. We'll talk about the state of the Panthers and where they are heading into. I can't say heading into this crucial stretch run. They are in the crucial stretch run. We'll talk about what we've seen out of the team and what they can do going forward. So mark your calendars. Don't tune in tonight at 8:30. We will not be live tonight. Instead, we're going to do it tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m., a special morning edition of the Panther-Lair Show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So tune in for that. All right, things to build on, things to continue, things to do better, things that can ultimately turn the corner for this team. And I think there's a few things that have stood out, and it's perfect that he pops up on the screen right now. Ishmael Leggett. All right, Ishmael Leggett is playing at a really high level right now. These last two games, he has been playing really, really well. He had a double-double against Miami with 21 and 10. He had 19 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists last night. He also had 5 assists against Miami. Ishmael Leggett over the last two games is averaging 20 points per game, Scored 21 and 19, 20 points per game. He's shooting 48% from the field, 12 of 25. He's shooting 5 of 7 from 3 in the last 2 games, 11 of 12 from the free throw line. He's got 17 rebounds in the last 2 games, 8 assists, playing at just a really high level. And I can't overstate how important I think that is. This team has needed, by Jeff Capel's own admission, someone to take the lead. And Capel has talked about needing someone in the locker room to step up and be that voice, and someone to kind of be a leader that way. But they also need it on the court. They need someone to emerge as the leader on the court. And in the last 2 games, when it's, the crunchiest of crunch times, Ishmael Leggett has been the guy who has emerged and had huge, huge games. They don't beat Miami. They don't come back and beat Syracuse without Ishmael Leggett. I mean, obviously, he was their leading scorer, he's the best player, and all that stuff. Ishmael Leggett has I don't want to say he has carried the team in the last 2 games, but he has played 2 of his best games of the season, I would say. Particularly when you consider the level of competition. I mean, playing against an ACC opponent, not necessarily 2 of the best teams in the ACC, but ACC opponents all the same. Ishmael Leggett has come up with 2 of his biggest games of the season and 2 of his best games of the season. He's been efficient. Like I say, 12 of 25 from the field, 5 of 7 from 3. He hasn't been a great 3-point shooter and actually was in a pretty big slump prior to these last 2 games. But he's been more efficient with his shots, and he's been more more particular with his shots. He was 7 of 7 from the free throw line against Miami, 4 of 5 last night. And again, 17 rebounds, 8 assists in the last 2 games. I mean, he is playing at a high level. When Pitt took the lead against Syracuse last night, it was on a pair of the back of 2 Ishmael Leggett threes. Sandwiched around a Cam Corrin and one that he didn't convert, and a Jalen Lowe drive. Actually, it was like 4 baskets in a row, but 2 of those 4 were Ishmael Leggett threes, just big shots that he drained. He is playing really well right now, and I mean, I'll say this a few times about a number of these trends that we're kind of highlighting here. This is exactly when you need a guy like Ishmael Leggett to elevate his game. You need him right now, and again, the crunchiest of crunch times, and that's exactly what he's doing. The other guy who has been, every bit as good as Leggett in the last 2 games, so not quite as good as Leggett, but maybe just as important, particularly on both ends of the court, is Zach Austin. Zach Austin has scored 30 points, in the last 2 games. I was looking at a different stat line. He had 11 points against Miami, and he had a double-double because he had 11 and 10. Last night he had 19 and 4, but he also had 3 blocks, so he's got 4 blocks in those 2 games. He's averaging 15 points per game, 7 rebounds per game over the last 2. He's shot 11 of 15 from the floor in the last 2 games. He was 8 of 10 last night, which actually includes 5 of 6 from inside the arc, which is a pretty remarkable number because he doesn't typically shoot that much inside the arc, and it wasn't all just offensive rebounds. That just which is kind of how he gets his points. His 2-point shots, usually his offensive rebounds and putbacks. He didn't have that many offensive rebounds last night, but he was scoring, and in addition to shooting 3 of 4 from 3. So in the last 2 games combined, he's 11 of 15 from the floor. He's 4 of 5 from 3, 4 of 5 from the free throw line. He's got 14 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 blocks, 30 points in the last 2 games. Zach Austin is playing a pretty big role. He's stepping up and elevating his game. And again, on both ends of the court. And I think Leggett has been defending well, but Austin in particular, the job he did on Matthew Cleveland on Saturday, and then just kind of being all over the place last night, Zach Austin's playing at a really high level. It's a little bit harder, I think, to rely on Zach Austin, at least for offensive contributions. You can get him those 3-point shots. He was in a bit of a slump there where he was sort of returning to his career averages after shooting really well earlier in the season. But now these last 2 games, he's 4 or 5 from deep. That's pretty good again. He might be trending back up, which, just like we said with Leggett, this is exactly the time you want that to happen. Now, it's a little bit harder to predict. Like I said, it's a little bit harder to rely on when you, with Zach Austin offensively, because you need to be able to find those shots for him, and he needs the shots to be going down. He's not a guy like Leggett who's going to be driving a lot and trying to get into the lane and trying to finish baskets that way. So you can't always rely on Zach Austin. I always used to talk about the Zach Austin chaos points, the fast breaks, the turnovers, loose ball situations, offensive rebounds, things that are not really in the normal flow of the offense, and that's typically how Austin's going to get his points. But he can be an X factor for this team. I think you have a lot of guys who can just do what they're doing and do what they're supposed to do, whether it's Ishmael Leggett or Jalen Lowe, Brandon Cummings in an emerging role, the centers, and then you have Zach Austin as a guy who can really put this thing over the top. 19 points yesterday. He really helped put Pitt over the top. Brandon Cummings has been playing well. These last 2 games without Damian Dunn. I know Dunn missed the SMU game as well, but really, you look at these last 2 games, the Miami and Syracuse games, he's got 22 total points scored. He shot 6 of 16 from the floor. Not great, 2 of 9 from 3. He's going to be better than that in most instances, but he's playing well. And getting better, I think, just with every minute he's on the court. It's amazing what happens when you take inexperienced guys and get them out there and get them playing time and get them experience. They get better. A lot of them do. They tend to get better. It's an amazing thing that happens. It's a crazy concept that I'm not entirely familiar with, but I think we've seen it with Brandon Cummings. We've seen that confidence growing, that fearlessness, which is what Jeff Capel talked about after the game last night, he will go in and mix it up. And I think the more he plays and the more time he spends on the court and the more he just works against other college basketball players, the better he's going to get. And the more comfortable he's going to get, the more confident he's going to get, and the more dangerous he's going to become, which again, you want to be surging at this time of year. Ishmael Leggett is surging. Zach Austin is surging. And I think Brandon Cummings is surging right now. And that's huge. If you can carry that on, if those guys can keep playing at a high level, the production and the efficiency and the defense, particularly with Leggett and Austin, you're going to have a chance. You're going to give yourself a chance. I tell you what else was big last night. Jalen Lowe comes back from missing the Miami game with a concussion. 17 points on 5 of 10 shooting, perfect from the free throw line with 6 of 6. He had 3 assists. He was one of 3 guys, actually, that had 3 assists for Pitt last night, along with Leggett and Guillermo Diaz-Graham. He also had 4 rebounds, only 1 turnover charged to Jalen Lowe. He had 1 steal. A really sharp game. Jeff Capel called it maybe his most efficient game of the season. Shot 5 of 10 from the floor. Capel pointed out that Lowe hasn't really shot 50% in any game this season. And I asked him after the game, I asked Jeff Capel, I said, do you feel like Jalen having that game to just sit and watch, which he probably hasn't done in a really long time, do you think that had an impact on him? Do you think that changed his perspective in any way? And he said, well, I can't speak for him, but the ball did move really well on Saturday. There was a lot of movement. There were a lot of good passes. It was sharp, a lot of cutting. Everything was flowing. And, I forget how far Capel went with the sentiment, but I think he effectively said, Jalen Lowe got to watch that. Everybody else got to do it and participate in it, and it seemed to have had a positive outcome or positive impact on on the team as a whole and Jalen Lowe. So here again, you've got a possibility, and I'm not gonna overstate the likelihood of any of these things happening or continuing, but you've got some signs indicating that Jalen Lowe is heading in the right direction, that Ishmael Leggett is trending in the right direction, that Zach Austin is trending in the right direction, that Guillermo Diaz-Graham, who has actually played pretty well in the last couple of games, didn't play a lot in the second half against Miami, but he still had 6 offensive rebounds against SMU, I think it was. He had 8 rebounds last night, 4 offensive and 4 defensive. He had 3 assists. He had 4 blocks. Guillermo did, plus a steal. Even though he only scored 8 points, he still produced quite a bit for this team when he was called upon. He came up with some big plays for Pitt. Led the team in blocks. Led the team in rebounds and tied for the team lead in assists and only had 1 turnover. So you've got a lot of these guys sort of maybe trending in the right direction. And again, I'm not going to guarantee that it's going to continue. This is exactly where they want to be. But if you're looking for signs of what you want this team to do or how you want them to be going or what direction you want them to be heading in, they've got some guys doing some very good things right now. Now, they played two of the worst teams in the ACC. Two teams that are, Miami's not going to make the ACC tournament, and Syracuse is right around the cut line. So, potentially two teams that aren't even going to make the conference tournament. So we're not going to overstate that. But you can't deny that those guys are headed in the right direction. And they did all of it last night without Amsal Delilich. He got a few minutes here and there, but not a whole lot. We could save that conversation for another time. Look, if you have something you want to talk about, if you have something you want to ask about, go to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com and go to the Between Fifth and Forbes message board where we've got our mailbag post. You can post a question there, and we'll answer as many as we can in the mailbag edition of the Morning Pit on Friday. And we'll have a live Panther-Lair show tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We hope you can join us tomorrow morning. We'll have another Morning Pit, of course. That'll be out there for you to listen to early in the morning, and then at 10:30 we'll have a live show, and hopefully everybody can tune in. No shots because it's 10:30 in the morning, but we'll have a good time all the same. We'll talk a little Pitt sports for a morning Panther-Lair show. Should be a good time. So hopefully you can tune in for that. No live show tonight, but we'll be back with the Morning Pit tomorrow to talk more Pitt sports with you, and then the live Panther-Lair show at 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Hope you've had a great week so far. Enjoy your Wednesday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.